Hey everybody, it's Meg and I am back with another video, and I'm not going to talk about cloth diapers today. I'm not going to talk about things that I might normally talk about. I am going to talk about the fact that my husband is on his way to a funeral right now. And it's a woman that he went to college with, and she had a baby girl 3 months ago, and she was suffering from undiagnosed postpartum or untreated postpartum depression, and in a fit of psychosis killed her husband, her daughter, and herself. So I wanted to talk about postpartum depression. I am a face of postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, and my son is almost a year old, and I'm just kind of realizing now what that means and what that looked like for me, because it didn't look like what I thought it should look like, quote unquote. I didn't have intrusive thoughts of harming my son. The public service announcements of postpartum depression isn't what postpartum depression looked like for me. I thought this was just my rough entry into motherhood, and that's really not what I was experiencing. I think I was experiencing something more, and this is my perspective of what was happening. So some of the things that I experienced, one of the things that happened is that I had an emergency section after 25 hours in labor. And so I had this kind of expectation after Felix was born that he would immediately be brought, one, that I would have a vaginal birth, and that he would immediately be brought skin to skin with me. And that's not what happened. I had a C-section, and so he was taken immediately by the NICU team and examined for 15 minutes or so, and I did not actually see him born. I didn't actually see him for close to 15 minutes, just the way it all played out, and that was really, really hard for me. And so basically from the time he was born, I started to have dreams that my baby had been switched in the hospital, that I had somebody else's baby and that I didn't have my baby. There was a disconnect in the baby that I had and the baby that I was caring for, so that was something. And then another thing that I was experiencing was this great anxiety when somebody else held my baby or took care of my baby. And this was really hard for me because I'd had a C-section and I couldn't sit up by myself or get up by myself or kind of take care of him by myself. And so it was very alarming for me, and I thought, I'm supposed to hand him off to other people for them to hold him and things like that. So that's what I did, because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. I didn't know that I could say, no, I'm just going to hang on to him. You can look at him, because he was the first grandchild. We had, grandparents coming in and that sort of stuff. So that was really hard. And then kind of as the weeks passed, I came home, and I couldn't have him in the room with me to sleep, because that was just too anxiety provoking. I would look over at him and just, is he breathing? Is he breathing? And it was also hard because I couldn't sit up and get to him for a couple of weeks after he was born, because again, I went through a 25-hour vaginal labor and then had a C-section, which is major abdominal surgery. Excuse me. This weather is driving me crazy. It's like 6 degrees outside. And so that was happening. And then in kind of the weeks that came, I could not leave him. My husband kept saying, get out, go do something. And it was so anxiety provoking for me to leave him. And I still have a really hard time leaving him. I described it to my husband as, it's almost like he was an appendage. Like if I didn't have him with me, it was like he was amputated. I had a really hard time being separated from him. And that led to all kinds of issues, because it led to a resentment against him. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Flower sectiles make great tissues. Excuse me, I'm so sorry about that. So I had a really hard time being away from him, but at the same time, I needed space from him, and I just didn't know how to do that. And the first time when I ever thought about harming Felix, I remember it was night after terrible sleep, like terrible sleep. And I'm just somebody who by nature needs a lot of sleep. That's just my makeup. It was a night of terrible sleep, and we needed to go to some type of like lunch thing at Brian's job. And so Felix needed to be dressed and presentable and like all this sort of stuff. And I don't even remember how old he was, but he was young. It was in the first 4 months or so. And I remember he wouldn't settle. I couldn't get him to calm down. And it was the first time I'd ever really thought about harming him. And it scared me. And I'm really glad that we had that like lunch to go to, even though I really didn't want to go and like smile and pretend that everything was okay in front of Brian's coworkers that I don't really know at all, apart from like stories he tells me. But we went, and on the way I called a mama of 4 boys who had also experienced some postpartum depression after at least her first and possibly more than that. And I'm really glad that I did that because I was able to talk to somebody about it. And there have been times when I've thought, no, this is just depression, because I have a long-standing history of depression and anxiety going back to when I was a teenager. And a lot of times it just looked like apathy and that kind of sort of stuff. But this, was different from that. This was very much connected to Felix, my son. And I thought, this is just what motherhood is. It's just this terrible, intense sadness. And that's not what motherhood is. Motherhood is hard, especially when we do it isolated and not in community. My going to my breastfeeding group every week has been amazing because it's allowed me to connect with other moms. But like, I thought that what I was experiencing was normal. And so I didn't feel the need to really talk about it or say like, hey, I think I have some postpartum depression. And my husband thought that this was Meg's depression coupled with new motherhood. So we didn't know kind of what to do about it. And I'm really grateful for the people that have stayed in our lives through this process, just simply by being present. Continuing to go to church for me has been a really big deal. My best friend Nora has been incredibly helpful. And now my friend Corinne, who's had her baby, being helpful to her in that way has been immensely helpful and healing for me. So I think what I wanted to do in this video is talk about postpartum depression doesn't always look like those public service announcements. I continued to take care of Felix because that's what I thought I should do. I just had all this stuff like wrapped up in my head that I don't know was necessarily healthy. And so if you're feeling that, please, I encourage you to talk to your partner or talk to somebody that you trust, and kind of see if there's something that you can do. There is, if you are in the St. Louis area, there is Spectrum Birth Center that deals with postpartum depression. There are tons of resources, but at Kangaroo Kids on the, I believe, second and fourth Thursday of every month, starting at 6:30, there is a postpartum meetup group. And I think I'm going to be attending that tomorrow, which is February 8th. So if you'd like to join me, you're more than welcome. If you are outside of the St. Louis area and would like to message me or comment on this, I'll do my best to get some resources to you. You don't have to walk through this alone. I felt so lonely and isolated, and like I was just crazy. Everyone kept saying he's just such an easy baby, and still even sometimes just get so angry and mad. But one of the things that my good friend Nora, God bless Nora, I just keep saying that, God bless Nora, she does not have children, does not particularly have any interest in having children, but absolutely adores my son. And has been a really good friend to me, and has been, my best friend for several years now. One of the things I talked about, because I had sort of a meltdown on Saturday, and I told her, Brian keeps trying to kick me out of the house to go and do things. And I said, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And she said, you'll figure it out when you're on your way there. She said, just get in the car, just walk out the door. And for me, that has been really helpful to know that I don't have to know where I'm going before I get in the car. And Corinne has started getting her nails done. And so I think I'm going to start getting my nails done. That's not something I normally do or indulge in when I have to pay for it. But I think that's something I'm going to start doing to take care of myself and to get away and to be Meg and not just Felix's mom. So if you are struggling with any of this, or if this resonated with any of you, please talk to somebody, because my husband's on his way to a funeral and I don't want it to be yours. Anyways, I'll talk to you later. Thanks.